Proceed to roll my piece. Backwoods and the onion of green. Burn one, take a break.
You're tuned in to a one-take podcast.
All right, what's up, everybody? It's great to be back. Of course, you know what this is.
You are listening to Hey, We Know Mine with show host Wood.
Hey, I had a little monologue planned out, but I actually did better. I have one of my favorite guests joining me again. So we'll kind of get into some intro comments, some current events on a couple of different things. Of course, World Series, maybe a little football, NFL, that is. We might revisit one of the troubling occurrences in the state of Michigan in several years. We might touch on that again. Before we put it to bed, probably take a look at next week's game. I'm speaking of the University of Michigan, still 15th ranked, I believe, Wolverines. We'll get into that, and then I'm going to take a stretch and dig into a little bit of NHL. Me and my guest were supposed to touch on this before the season, but he had some new moves that he had in his life, and we just kind of got back in touch a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to tackle the NHL. I'm going to talk about the Red Wings a little bit. This show isn't intentionally meant to focus on everything Michigan, but it's just kind of played out that way. Maybe I don't have any friends in Ohio, so but I did do an Ohio State preview, so that does count. But before we do get into the intro topics, I just have to eat a little bit of crow. As you know, I'm a Washington Redskins fan, and the Redskins were successful in putting down the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. They came back from being down 0-24 at home. I'm sure the Boo Birds were out. I didn't get to watch the game live, but luckily Andrew Luck had a poor day, so locally they switched over to watch the greater part of the second half of the Washington game. So I didn't have to go spend some money at the wing spot or Bar and Grill. But, Kirk Cousins went from being Pro Football Focus, their worst player in the league the week before, on their weekly worst team in the league, where they pick the worst players at each position. And I believe the previous week that Kirk Cousins was graded out as like the worst player in the league, and he bounced back. But I think it was all set up perfectly for him to do so. You got to give a lot of credit to Brashad Breeland for running down Tampa Bay's Doug Martin on that last rush. That if they score that touchdown there, they put the game out of reach. It would have been a 2-score game, and the Redskins would have been up against the clock. But the defense showed up, late, got the job done. Jordan Reed, anytime he's on the field, the team is that much better. Kirk didn't throw any picks, threw for over 300 yards. I believe he was the first quarterback to throw 2 game-winning touchdown passes in like the last 30 seconds. I really have nothing bad to say. I had jumped on the team and tweeted out some stuff when they were down 0-24. I will say, and maybe my guest can touch on this when I bring him in, but I thought the penalty that went against Mike Evans, where he caught the touchdown pass, I'm not so sure there was a lot of passing interference there on the offense. I think the guy lost the defender, the Redskin lost his footing or lost his balance trying to look back to find the ball, and then they engaged, and it was a little bit of shove, but I didn't think it was anything egregious. But anyway, it took the touchdown off the board and just kind of set up everything for the closing of the closing events up to the game. So hats off to Kirk Cousins. I still was concerned about how much how little Morris was involved in the game, but they were down big early, So, maybe that worked against him getting a lot of carries. But looking forward, I just feel like we have a bye, and then going into Foxborough at 2-5 versus now being 3-4, it's a world of difference. That's a tall order to get a victory in Gillette Stadium for a number of reasons, but it'll be a tall task for Jay Gruden and Kirk Cousins. But we'll see what we can do. Hopefully the Miami Dolphins can do some things tomorrow night and maybe soften them up a little, but, we'll see. But again, hats off to Kirk Cousins. Hats off to Jay Gruden for not losing the team in a bad spot. I would get into, I'll just get ready to move on, but I just feel like, 6 to 8 wins is probably still attainable. But I just feel like a lot of shakeup could be coming in the roster as far as Deshaun Jackson not being available so far. Jordan Reed, he's a great player, but his availability has been limited. So I don't know, if you can go into next season depending on him unless he finishes this season strong. And, I think another couple of wins. If Kirk Cousins would have done the same thing against ATL, against the Dirty Birds a few weeks ago when he threw the pick 6 to lose the game, if he would have won then, we might have been looking at moving RG3 already. Not that's really what I want to see, but I will say Herschel Walker came out today and said that RG3 needs to be in Dallas. I thought that was interesting. But we'll get ready to move on. I just want to eat my crow on the Redskins. The division is all knotted up. Everybody's within a game of one another, with the Cowboys being at the bottom. We'll touch base on the Cowboys here in just a second. But right now, I want to introduce my guest. Welcome my man back to the show, Ronnie. You might remember him as my golf contributor, but tonight he's putting on another hat, and we're going to talk a little bit of hockey, after we get into some opening topics. How you doing, Ronnie?
Good. How are you doing tonight?
All right, man. I was working on the show for Friday and getting ready to do some boxing and everything, but it was just a slow Wednesday night. We're in the game 2 of the World Series, and it is some good football topics to talk through. So I thought I'd get on and do a show, and I'm glad that you had some time to come back to pay me no mind and rap with me for a few minutes. What's your thoughts, man? We saw. Oh, thanks. So last night was game 1 of the World Series coming to us from Kansas City, Missouri, and 14-inning game. I didn't get to watch all of it. I think I may have made it into the 10th or 11th inning. It ended in the 14th with Kansas City taking the first game. I believe Hosmer had a sacrifice fly to drive in the run. What's your thoughts on the series so far?
Well, last night, really, except for one run, it was pretty much an even played game. The story of, I think, the series, for each team is, the Kansas City bullpen and the Mets starting rotation for pitching. However, it seemed like last night the starting rotation for Kansas City matched the Mets, and the Mets were not able, in terms of closing the game, to match the Royals bullpen. So, I think that's going to be the story for the rest of the series, as it was last night. But it's a good matchup. I do believe the teams are, pretty evenly compared to one another. So, I think it'll go probably, if it gets tied tonight, I think it goes, to a full series. If it doesn't, I think Kansas pulls it out if they win tonight.
Yeah, I was leaning heavily towards the Mets. For the Mets, obviously for the pitching. You thought Daniel Murphy would continue. Well, you thought his tear would kind of slow down, but I was hoping that he hit that home run in the 7th consecutive game. That didn't happen. But after taking in last night's game, I'm concerned. I think DeGrom, I think I would have been comfortable with him going out game 1 instead of Harvey. But the thing that really came back to the forefront for me was the fact that Kansas City is just gritty, and they're unflappable. I can't put my finger on what they do great, but as a team, they're just very formidable. And I'll just say that you've been watching the Tigers, the last several years, and I just felt like even when the Tigers were kingpins of the AL Central, they always struggled with Kansas City, going back 3 or 4 years, and it's basically the same lineup. There may be a few changes in there, but this team, they don't have all the 40 home run guys and, mid 40 home run guys, but as a team, they just manufacture runs.
I think they're a group that they're all skilled, but no one is. I just think they're an even team across all parts of the game. They play a system, they buy into it, and they get it. Like you said, they're not all stars. I don't think in any one particular aspect of the game, but just across the board, they're probably the most balanced team, I'd say, in baseball throughout the season and last season and this season as well. And it's it showed throughout the playoffs and through game 1 as well. And I believe right now it's tied 0-0 at the bottom of the second. But if they continue to show that capability of just playing a balanced game, I don't think the Mets have really much of a chance. Because the Mets, last night their closing was a little worse than Kansas City, and that decided the game.
Right. Familia ended up having to stumble and gave up the home run, a big home run too, as far as the length of it. But it'll be interesting to see. Cueto has had his problems in the postseason, and he's got this. He's on the mound tonight, but like you said, it is 0-0 in the bottom of the second, so that's a good start for him. I think like you said, I think Kansas City play. I think the one thing that they do exceptionally well is play defense. I mean, and they have a great center fielder in Kane, but I will say, without really having that one superstar for you to keep an eye on, I just feel like it doesn't put pressure on the team. We're not waiting for one guy to do anything. We're waiting on 5 or 6, 7 guys to do something. And it's just, I don't think it gives the press much, ammunition to question them or take shots at them. They're not gathered at one guy's locker asking when are you, we're not waiting on Barry Bonds to break out or the old catcher from the Mets. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But, we're just not looking at that. Piazza. Yeah, we're not looking at one player to just break out. So I just think it keeps those guys really loose. And I think when they, they could have got down after Hosmer had that error at first base, but somebody just bailed him out. And now we're not even thinking about that when, last night when it happened, we were saying, the flashbacks of Bill Buckner and the ground ball from Boston or the Mets that rolled through his legs. We were replaying all of that. But now, the guy comes back and drives in the run, and that's not even an issue now. So it'll be interesting how, the series progresses. But I think I have switched over to kind of favoring the Royals. Staying in that part of the country, what's your thoughts on Greg Hardy, man, and this blow up that he had and his impact on the Dallas Cowboys?
He just, I just don't think he gets it. And, I I can appreciate, I guess, some emotion and just intensity, but you need to find different ways to channel it